646 News, the most trusted source of news in all of America. Thanks for tuning in. The New York Times forecasted on November 8th, 2016, that Hillary Clinton had an 85% chance of winning the presidential election. And we all saw how that turned out. Here at 646 News, we have worked on a much more accurate and verified model of political events, which our experts call the common sense model. 646 News is officially announcing that based off our complex model, taking into account the latest state and national polls, former Vice President Joe Biden's chance of winning the 2020 election is between 0 and nothing. Our computer simulation suggests that if you walk into a voting booth on November 3rd, 2020 to vote for Mr. Biden, you are more likely to win the lottery and be struck by lightning while being eaten by a pregnant shark later that day than to wake up the next morning and find that your candidate has won the election. This news was received with great excitement by Democratic leaders across our country who have been hard at work for months to make this happen. My colleague Amin is here with me today to discuss this development further. Amin, you might remember that the New York Times forecasted on November of 2016 that Hillary Clinton had an 85% chance of winning the election. Now, the New York Times model is not nearly as accurate as ours, but this did cause a great deal of anxiety to real Democrats. Isn't that true?
That is very true, Surur. In 2016, Democrats felt like all their efforts at running the worst campaign of the past 50 years was going to waste right in front of their eyes. So naturally, they spent the past 3 years trying to make sure that they will never feel that close to winning an election again. Of course, now we know that was just a feeling, and the New York Times model was more useless than a used condom. Democrats were never going to win that election, but still, the fear of winning felt real at the time.
Because us liberals believe anything that we read in the New York Times, no matter
Exactly.
how absurd or nonsensical it is.
Absolutely. And so that 85% chance you mentioned got all liberals very anxious. We got together and we said, how do we make sure this does not happen again?
I think it's pretty straightforward from there. You find someone with all the weaknesses of Hillary Clinton and none of her strengths.
Exactly. And voila, Joe Biden. When you look at Joe Biden, you feel like he was literally born to lose an election to Donald Trump.
But we still had the formidable task of getting the man finished as Democratic nominee when he can't even finish a sentence without forgetting what he had to say somewhere in between.
Yes, sir, that's right. And especially having to face the Bernie Sanders campaign with their insane fundraising number and their grassroots organizing. Now, I'm not one to be divisive and polarizing, but let's get serious, people. Bernie Sanders is not even a real Democrat. I mean, what's the one thing Democrats are great at?
Losing elections.
Right? So, Bernie Sanders would have had an actual chance of winning. Any idiot understands that's not a real Democrat. He would have ruined the longest standing image of the Democratic Party as the party that stands for nothing and achieves even less. Don't people understand that leaders like us here at 646 News have spent decades to build that image? Do you think it's easy to get so many people to either stay home or vote for Republicans? You can't just walk in with actual ideas and an inspiring message and seriously talk about real problems as if we were here to win elections and solve problems. That's not what the Democratic Party is all about.
Yeah, that's very well said. So, how do you think we can prevent this from happening?
Well, we and all our colleagues in the media did whatever we could to talk some sense into people and to bring them up to speed about electability.
To be honest, I mean, I've heard that word being used like 10 billion times and I still don't know what the fuck that means. And I don't think anyone does either. So, can you explain a little bit about that term to us?
Sure. Actually, what makes electability such a great word, Surur, is the fact that it means absolutely nothing, and yet it sounds like it does. You see, that's why we in the pundit class love it so much. People like me, we are paid to talk nonsense based on nothing. Our job is very delicate in that we have to make nothing sound like something.
I'm still not sure I'm following you there. I mean,
Alright, let me explain with an example. Say I wanted to convince someone to eat a piece of shit. Now, that would be a very difficult task for both parties involved. They would look at it and they'd see shit. They would smell it, and guess what? It smells like shit. Now, if I were to claim that it tastes great, they wouldn't believe me. So I make up a word, a totally meaningless one. I say it's electable. Now, they're gonna look at me and ask, what do you mean it's selectable? I mean, it's just shit, man. But what they don't know is that in order to ask that question, they have to open their mouth. And as soon as they do, I'll shove that shit so far down their throat that they'll choke on it.
Okay, amazing. Now I finally figured out what it means. So, is this what the New York Times model was doing when they said that Hillary Clinton had an 85% chance of winning?
Well, sir, I think that's even a bit further. I think that happens when the pundits and analysts get so deep into their act that they start to actually believe the piece of shit they're trying to sell to people is electable, and they end up eating it themselves.
Amazing. Now, Amin is an important pillar of mainstream media in this country. Of course, we have a liberal bend. But we haven't, up until now, even once discussed the allegations of sexual assault against former Vice President Joe Biden by Tara Reid, a former member of his Senate staff. We did not want our millions of viewers to look into these allegations yet. Can you tell us why liberal major media outlets like us have kept quiet on these allegations for so long?
Yeah, of course. So even now, the Democratic primary process is not officially over. And as part of this nation's liberal establishment, the last thing we wanted people to do was to go vote for Bernie Sanders if their state's primary had not taken place yet. The allegations of sexual assault against Joe Biden seemed like the sort of thing that would be best to come out against the Democratic nominee leading up to the general election. I mean, just in case, if the fact that he's clearly demented and is rarely able to finish a sentence, and all his other great qualities, of which he has many, didn't do it for a voter. Maybe this could be the thing that stops them from voting for Democrats. And we decided to preserve this as sort of a last resort, a guarantee, if you like, because we don't like to take any risks.
Because we want and need absolute 100% certainty that a Democrat will lose the election.
Exactly.
I also wanted to talk to you about the economic intercourse plan that Joe Biden has. Can you tell me a little bit about what this intercourse entails?
Sure. This intercourse